Okay, welcome. Today is Tuesday, April the 17th, 2018. This is the Board of Pitkin County Commissioners. It's our work session for the day. And we are starting out here at 1 o'clock with our 2018 Community Survey Questions discussion. Please give your name for the public record.
I'm Pat Bingham, and I'm Community Relations Coordinator for Pitkin County. And every 2 years, we conduct a community survey to gauge the sentiments of the public on how we're doing as a county government. We've done 5 surveys to date, and I'm here today with the draft survey questions that haven't changed a lot. If anything, we eliminated a couple of questions that were no longer relevant, but they're very similar to questions we've asked in the past because we like to gauge opinion over time on the same types of issues. So I'm here today to hear what you all have to say, and if you have any additions or deletions, let me know, please.
George.
Hello.
Hello.
A couple of questions or comments. Let's see. Starting on the second one, county services and initiatives, when we have a list of 12. Just trying to sort of simplify this and see what people would really understand. We have parks, trails, and open spaces. So we have another section on trails and open spaces, but we really don't have parks, per se, in the county. I just wonder if that would confuse people and think more along the lines of the city.
That's a good point.
We do have one park in Redstone.
Yeah, the out park.
Yeah.
But,
It's our only park.
So anyway, I'm just going through all these comments, and the other one is management of stormwater runoff flood control in the county. Flood control, I mean, somehow the wording, stormwater runoff, again, that's more of a sort of a municipality sort of phrase versus flood control or...
That's a good point. I'm not even sure why we've asked it in the past.
Yeah. I'll just run through these unless people...
No, you keep going. No, you got the
unless you
floor.
wanna comment. Then we get into open space and trails. And these are older questions. So I wonder whether there's something more pertinent that maybe you could check with Gary Tenenbaum that might be more important. So the first one says, how important do you think it is to develop a hard surface trail connection between the communities in Aspen and Down Valley? Well, we have the Rio Grande Trail.
Not all. It's not paved all the way, though.
No,
Yeah,
but
there's
it
only a
doesn't
short.
really talk about that. So, I mean, if you want to talk about one specific section, which we've gotten feedback on, that's fine. But this, when I read this, I
And they're also thinking about, I think they're thinking about, because I have checked with Gary on this, but
Yeah,
we can
okay.
revisit. I think he was thinking the section between, wasn't he, the Airport Business Center and
Slaughterhouse
Intercept
Bridge
Lot.
in Woody Creek.
Where's that question?
well, that's
And that, well,
further
that's
down,
what this would
number
be.
5,
number 5.
not number
But
4.
that's not, doesn't say
So
that
that-
here.
But if you look at number 5, it's asking about a hard surface connection between the
The
intercept
intercept
lot
lot
and the Rio
and-
Grande
And I
Trail.
think we have that.
Trail.
And we actually do have that. It actually has been reconfigured a few years ago,
What about
going
these?
down to Woody Creek.
Between,
The intercept lot and the Rio Grande Trail was paved with the gas line improvements. They reconfigured the trail there and paved it.
so I'm again, I'm not an open space
No,
expert.
that's
This
fine.
would be totally up to open space and trails,
Right.
and I'm not as up to speed on what their initiatives are these days, but I assume this was about between the Airport Business Center and
Well,
the intercept
But
lot.
it
This
says
is
the
the
intercept
intercept
lot
lot.
and the Rio Grande Trail.
Okay.
So I would.
So let me get back to Gary and just say, let's try to refine these a little bit and update them and more than they have been.
Okay, and
He may
then-
have been thinking about the little section that's left to
Tacking on to that one
pave.
that trail actually doesn't connect to the Rio Grande Trail. It goes down to the bridge, but then you have to get on the county road
Right.
to get back up to the Rio Grande.
Right.
So
So
there is a stretch that there isn't actually a trail.
that's correct. Right.
Yeah, just so we don't have to come back to this question, I agree with asking Gary and refreshing. And the main thing is I think there just needs to be more specificity. If he's really trying to get feedback about a specific section, there needs to be some specificity. If we want to ask, should the Rio Grande Trail from W/J to Aspen be paved into hard trail surface, ask that. But otherwise, it's too generic. And
Right.
Be specific.
I think overall, for me, each one of these sections really needs a real check back with the department head in charge of them to say, are these the most current, and are these going to give you the most information you need, knowing we want to baseline and track with other communities to the extent possible. But some of these have gotten dated. I think that number 6 question was asked prior to us wanting to go for the reauthorization and could be dropped out entirely now.
Greg,
Just to add
then I'll
on to
go back
that,
to
Hey,
George.
that's fine.
while we're on it, I'd love to see a specific question asking if people, how important do people think a connection between intercept lot and ABC is? Because when I first read this, I was thinking it's ABC, maybe like you did. It's not. And I think I've had more requests for that. What can we do about that than anything else on?
They're going through
regarding
shale
Yeah.
bluffs.
And it should actually say the Brush Creek intercept lot.
Thank you.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
Brush
say
Creek,
that, and
yeah.
there's intercept lots up and down the valley.
True.
So I'm going to back up a bit, George, to
Yeah.
what you said on item number 2. There's 13 issues there. On number 13, code and ordinance response to code development violations. Shouldn't it be development code
Where are you?
violations?
Where did you just?
Back to number 2.
Number 2,
Oh, sorry,
page
13.
1.
Say again?
Number 13 on number 2. I don't know what code development violations are. Shouldn't it be development code violations?
Or just development violations.
We're talking about code enforcement.
Yeah,
Yeah, just,
code violations.
yeah, or development code violations, not code development violations.
Thank you.
And George, I agree with you on those questions 4 and 5. They just need to be clarified and updated.
And then we go through a whole list of departments and needs. So number 8, just as an example, you have landfill and recycling. And so you have 9 different questions, and we're rating them. We're asking them to rate them from don't know to very satisfactory. And then each of these segments follows up which 3 of the items do you think should receive the most emphasis over the next 2 years? And it seems like if we're able to just use the rating system, you know,
We should be able to tell what
we
they
should be able to
rated.
tell. These are like a whole. Maybe I'm misreading.
It's
this.
actually, it's 2 different questions. One question is asking, how well are we doing? And the others are really asking, what should we be paying attention to? You might recall we do those matrices that
Right.
say, you know, how are we doing on something, and then how is it prioritized for folks? Because we may be doing really well at something that's not as high a priority for people. So that's why we actually use that information a lot in our budgeting and trying to prioritize, you know, where do we need to be paying attention.
Okay, that's fine.
And that point too, but we don't ask that under item number 7 under water issues. We don't ask if they have a priority, which it may be a boot point because there's only 4 issues, but somewhere in here between open space and trails and water issues, we never ask anybody about healthy rivers and streams. And we're doing major projects now.
Yeah.
So we might want to ask Lisa McDonald if there's any questions she might like to ask the public as to, you know, what they think we should be using our Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund for.
Yeah, I know we're jumping around now, but I had marked that one for a question mark as well. And at the very least, we should ask for supporting children's education, water education programs.
Because that's a big thing we're
But
doing
that's
now
something
with the
they want
water
to make
fund.
their legacy program, and we should ask how important that is. But again, I kind of thought almost all of these needed to be updated at some level and somewhere, but without making it longer, asking what can we take off. And I still think the number 6 question, back to open space and trails portion of your property tax, which isn't actually accurate depending on which district you live in, and you may be paying Crown Martin property tax too, so even the percentage isn't really always accurate. It's just not necessary now. We've already done the election, we got the feedback. I don't see that as being a
That
necessary
one we
question.
could possibly
Strike
eliminate.
6.
Yeah.
It's good. If we're going to add them, we need to eliminate
Yeah,
them.
that's what Rachel's trying
I've
to
got a
focus.
few.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
still rolling.
I'm going to go back to George and let
Yeah.
him keep going down through the list.
let's see. You know, a lot of these issues is not only a way to just get feedback, but it's a way to educate in terms of what all the services the county provides. And so on number 18, perceptions of current transportation issues, we have on number 7 and number 8, availability of mass transit. I wonder if we could reword that or incorporate trying to get a sense of how many people are actually utilize mass transit, RAFTA in particular.
So that would have to be maybe a different question.
Yeah, this is sort of rating the
Yeah.
satisfaction.
Are there some yes/no questions, or do you use
George,
RAFTA?
are you, just out of curiosity, are you looking for that so you can cross-tab, actual users
might help
to
with-
satisfaction?
Yeah.
'Cause I think we've got good writer numbers from RAFTA
Right.
that our survey, because it's a random sample, probably won't give us a good,
Okay.
do you know what I'm saying? A better
Yeah.
indicator of how many people are using it.
Right.
So if you're looking at for crosstab, that's probably useful. If you're looking at for a number, this may not be the right instrument for that.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to tag on to, though, on question 18. On number 4, availability of parking. Do we really want the AABC in there? Wouldn't it be better to add buttermilk now? I don't really want people to be parking at the AABC because there's really no parking there.
Yeah.
So I would take out AABC and put buttermilk, since we're now encouraging people to use the buttermilk lot.
So, and that was one of those historical ones, because you
Right.
might recall we did the
We revamped
Public
it.
Works project in the ABC that realigned parking and did the
Right.
stormwater at that time. I think now that may be one of the ones, like Rachel's saying, that would.
Yeah, we need to clarify. Yeah, Rachel?
While we're on number 18, I just find the sequencing of these to be just all over the place. Number 1 is ease of driving in the county in the winter. And I'd like to follow that up with number 6 of condition of county roadways. We just really jump back and forth on this one. Then I don't know what the ease of traveling from Pitkin County to other cities in Colorado means. If we said on state roads, maybe were we trying to get feedback about overall road condition? But I think that number 2 could be dropped, probably. It's not going to give us any information that I know what I would do with. Then the number 3 is a little confusing. Availability of shared use trails. Does that mean trails that connect to transit from where you live, or does it mean open space and trails, hiking trails?
Now, why is it under
Yeah,
transportation?
it just at the very least, it should go down under number 9, the ease of traveling by bicycle in Pitkin County, and then the availability of shared use trails, so that these questions flow a little better. Again, number 5 should move up so that the first question is ease of driving in the county of the winter, condition of county roadways, and then traffic safety on major county roads, which is number 5. And then go into the mass transit questions. I mean, availability of mass transit, availability of parking, satisfaction with the
Yeah,
system.
I think she gets it, what you're going for.
Okay, can fix that
Great,
easily.
thank you.
Steve, do you have anything on that one?
Well, the number 6 on condition of county roadways, and our issue with the county roadways is the vegetation along the side gets butchered all the time by county crews, or the trees, bases of the trees get dirt shoved over on them and buried, and the trees are ending up dying because of they're getting hit by the maintainer, or different issues about the vegetation and not the actual condition of the roadway. But we don't have a question asking about the vegetation along the side of the road.
Maybe instead of condition, maybe maintenance of county roadways. Would that address that?
Yeah.
They'd be thinking, I think if I were asked that, I'd think potholes and
Yeah.
chip and seal. I wouldn't be thinking about trees.
Roadside.
The only thing I'd caution on is we do benchmarking on these questions. So if the questions are
From other
different,
years to now,
well, not just other years to now, but also with other communities. So the company that we use has a database of how communities of similar size and such respond throughout the United States. So we try and provide you guys benchmarking information to put the answers to the questions in context. And so I just maybe put a footnote that, you know, if we're changing the questions, we either need to say we're okay losing that benchmarking, or it'd be an additional kind of question.
I'm not sure, how would you word a question about what happens to the trees when dirt is pushed
That could
on
be,
it?
that would be very complex, because people would think when they fall over on the road after today.
It's a
or-
tough one.
I'd
It's a
like
tough
to,
one.
I'd like to suggest that perhaps what we do is look at this, that we see what the satisfaction numbers are on the kind of generic question that's there. And if it seems to be rating low, maybe do a drill down follow-up survey with just Public Works about the roads and road maintenance and the vegetation and things like that. But I don't know how to break it out and have a serious answer from folks.
Another way to deal with that would be to just have and I suggest this at the end, have a very good comment section where child family could refer to that question and write comments. That way our concerns are given to the county, and
Yeah.
and it doesn't necessarily have to be a question for the whole general public, but just having a good comment section, I think, is important.
Greg, please.
Just regarding transportation, I was just thinking about how much has changed since this was done. We have a big issue coming up regarding e-bikes or alternative vehicles of some sort on trails, and whether they're allowed or not, and safety in those areas. And then there's the electric vehicles charging stations. Could that be part of this transportation? I'm just thinking, do we need to update this so it really helps us?
Yeah, I was told, I'm not sure, that by the time this survey goes out, that the e-bike survey that's being done is already going to have been, they are already going to have collected all that information. I
don't
thought
need
about
that.
the same thing, and they said, oh, well, we're already into that. I don't know about electric cars, you know, and
Electric
charging
charging,
stations.
could that be part of this, and would that be useful information?
Well, and then I don't know how we, again, benchmark that. We use this information for benchmarking and from comparisons to year, not that we shouldn't start new comparisons for year to year.
Yeah, I mean, we could see if they've got that, but if it would be useful, another way to think about it is from that perspective, if it would help this board to make a decision that's in front of you. So if you feel like there is a policy decision around the adequacy of electric charging stations, then I think you can ask that and kind of see what the satisfaction level is. When I was talking about the road maintenance and such, those are pretty standard questions. That's where I was saying if you start to modify those too much, you probably make them so you can't benchmark them. The board, and a lot of the questions that you're taking out are really questions that were added by past boards because there was a policy question that the board was getting ready to wrestle with. So if you feel like electric charging stations kind of rises to that level where it's right for us to be talking about that, then I suggest, yeah, you could ask that for.
Are electric charging stations convenient, or do we have enough? Something.
Right, we have to craft
And they-
that. And on the same number 9 on 18, ease of traveling by bicycle, I'd like to do ease and safety of traveling by bike. Is that a problem that can, ease is one thing, safety is another?
It may end up being two questions.
Yeah.
We'll have our consultant look at all these to make sure that they're valid, and so they'll make a suggestion as to whether something needs to be broken up or worded a little bit differently.
Like, for instance, with the electric vehicle charging stations, they might have you ask it, are you satisfied with the number of electric
Right.
vehicle, and very satisfied, not satisfied, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
so we
That's
can-
kind of how they make us
Right.
do it.
I've got just two more.
Okay, and then we'll go back to random ones. Go ahead.
Yeah, but that's great. The next one, community support,
Which number?
number 20.
Okay.
So we have the first question is health and human services provided by local nonprofits. It may be an opportunity to say a health and community fund providing support for nonprofits. Something along that line. I don't know the correct wording, but to get healthy community fund in there as raising awareness, education, and see how many people are actually
Yeah, ask Nan
understand
maybe how she'd word a question in there.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to have our own poll.
Right.
I understand that, but it's going to be a much, like when we talk about cross-tabbing again, and this perhaps will reach additional people that won't get polled specifically.
Yeah, so there's a good chance that there won't be a lot of crossover between the folks getting pulled. The other thing that we're going to need to talk about probably today a little bit is timing, because we do have the Healthy Community Fund going out in May. We may want to space this out a little bit so there's not kind of polling fatigue from the public too.
Right, okay. Anyone on that? Yeah.
Yeah, just on that one, I kind of beg to differ, because this is a little bit asking about whether people are aware or use health and human services in the valley at all, regardless of who funds them. And so it's like getting the generic answer first before you later ask specifics about do you support a tax or not. And this would just give us that kind of baseline of, well, do these people, are our public using any of these services, without having to tie it into the fact that we're taxpayer supported as well. So I could leave this one alone, and I know we can't make the survey too long. If there was any, I'd say, if I could, as a magic wand, say, if somebody says yes, or gives a high, can you name any nonprofits that you're familiar with that you or your families use, and then see if any names pop out from people. But again, we can't really do
because
that.
we have the community survey coming out.
I know.
And this survey probably will not come out until after we've drafted our ballot question
And
for
so,
November.
again, I would just leave that one the way it is. I think it still gives us good information. It's separate from whether you want to keep funding them, but tells how much people think they're important, regardless of how they're funded. The one that bothers me out of this section is number 6, just that term, public health. We're forming a new health department. If you ask 3 people on the street, what does public health mean? I don't think they'd be able to tell you what it means. And I don't know if, again, going back to the individual departments and the directors who can use this information, is this question going to give her any feedback at all, any real information?
You could put in parentheses, like they did on environmental health, some of the services from public health.
We could either take that approach, or if we're eliminating enough questions in other parts of the survey, and I haven't tabulated, I haven't kept a tab going.
I don't think we're eliminating a lot.
No. We could maybe break it down into like 2 or 3 of the key services. So that
I think you have environmental health, and you have in parentheses some of the services offered.
I could do that. I
think you could just ask Karen.
I just think there needs to be more there.
Yeah.
what she would put in those
I think
parentheses.
that would.
we can do
Okay,
that.
because we have some staff waiting, so we need to kind of.
Okay.
George, you want to keep going?
One
since
more,
we're on a roll?
under demographics, number 38 versus number 39. I just saw a report about getting the country getting ready for the census, and the fear from Latino community in terms of filling out any forms because of fear of reprisals and getting extradited, or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I would reconsider. I had that one circled too, George.
I would maybe take 38 out, and 39 would cover it. That's sort of a much more generic if you wanted to leave that in, but
Yeah, if you add in that category to number 39.
Yeah.
And I would point out, going back to what Steve was saying, do we have a place for general comments? And we do, right before demographics, number 30 is, do you have
30
any
is a
comments or
general
suggestions
comment
regarding
section.
any county provided services? That's that place where you would fill in the blank.
Well, you can write in more, but I'm going to go back up real quick since we do, but to number 24, you have the numbers wrong. It says, do you have access to the internet at home? Answer question 26, but 26 is the airport. So does that mean you skip number 25 if you have access?
Okay, got it. Good.
I
good
missed
one.
that. I'm
Or
not
should you
sure what
answer
that-
25 if you answered yes to 24? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then I had one more real quick, and that was back on land use under 14, page 3. The first one, required preservation of the historic character of residential areas in Pickens County. I'm not quite sure what all that means. Could you just ask community development to look at that statement?
Yeah. It'd
Okay.
be interesting. I wonder if that one goes way back to when we were doing the historic preservation
Yeah.
code, and that's why it was
That
asked
was
or
my
something
first
like
thought,
that.
so just to see if they would reword it or if they even want to
Okay.
keep it in there. Okay, Rachel, and then I know Steve's got a lot, and then like I said,
Okay.
we have staff.
For me, the number 44 question is totally irrelevant. It makes it sound like this is an affordable housing study to see who doesn't work enough hours and we're going to kick them out. You know, do you typically work less than 32 hours a week? We'd like to know where you live. You know, I just don't know what value that adds to anything we do. So I don't like question number 44.
Benchmark.
There's one to get rid of.
We'll
Back
see.
to like number 28. These questions again are out of sequence to me, or just not. Both item number 6 response and number 9 are both about the same and
I
should
had
be
those both
combined into
circled.
one thing. For importance of promotional value of large televised scale, economic benefits of large scale. So those could be one question there. Number 7 could be just shortened communication about large-scale events, potential impact to the communication, not and there. We could drop those 2 words out of that one. But again, I think that we should get all the kind of large-scale events and things, if we're talking about the X Games, right up together. Pull that number 6 and 9 somewhere up closer to the top.
That's not the top 10.
We dropped number 6 already.
I disagree with dropping 6 only because it's a different question. Some people would debate the importance of the promotional value, while the other one's about organization and coordination. How well done is it? If it's really well done, they may not.
I said combine 6 and 9.
6 and 9. Oh, economic benefits.
Right, and I thought 6 and 9 could
Okay,
be
thank
combined
you.
and
All
then
right.
bring them up closer to the other
To get them
questions.
together, okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
sorry if I wasn't clear. Under landfill and recycling, the food waste disposal / composting program, we don't have the words composting program, and that's what this is really is. If you ask
What
me.
number are you on?
Number
Back to
8,
on page 2.
landfill. The response, number 6, food waste disposal, it doesn't mean much. Composting program does, you know, or how to phrase that.
Update that.
And we also should ask for how important is the permitting for expansion and extending the life of the landfill. That's not in there in any way, shape, or form. But it's good to know if people are aware of this. Number 7, I think, question 7, I already mentioned adding a number 5, promoting water education with school children as a possible benefit. I'm trying to go through these really quickly and make sure I didn't miss any. We already covered a lot.
Go too quickly, okay?
Okay, sorry. Number 22, prosperous economy. I hate to add one, but I think we should ask a number 7, availability of affordable health insurance, and get a little bit more of a temperature on our residents of how they're feeling the effects of that or not.
You could also combine maybe 3 and 4, availability of childcare, availability of affordable childcare. I know they're
I agree
different,
with
but
that.
that could be the same if we wanted to add one more there.
I would combine those 2, Patty. I
Got that, Pat?
appreciate that. Internet service, I really just would like to kick that back to Cara and her team and say, are there any more important questions you need to ask than this? Do you need to ask this at all? Does it need to be eliminated? Because we've done separate surveys on that sort of thing. But I don't know. I just think we should kick it back to the appropriate staff people on that. And then the big one for me was the airport. It's number 26. On number 7 on the restaurant, when the surveyors read it, they should note that there's a new restaurant that opened December of 2017 or something. Otherwise, people will be thinking the last time they went there, the last restaurant that was there, and they may not realize that there's a new restaurant, so maybe I shouldn't apply to this one or something. But, you know, you should definitely note that a new restaurant opened on so-and-so date. And then the question of ground transportation, I just don't know what it means. Is it ground transportation to town once you've arrived at the airport, or is it ground transportation to Denver when the planes aren't flying?
Bus service.
It's all I guess it means ground transportation. It would be all of the above, I
Yeah, we
suppose.
can't do when you're going to town, when you're going to.
I know, but I'm just kind of wondering, will it
What
give us,
value does it
it will
have?
give us real
Right.
information that's of value to people is more, and I don't know if the airport folks can drill down on that to see what were they trying to answer? You know, what were they trying to know about customer opinions there?
Steve's got a whole list. And we have
And the last one
minute.
is the airport parking. Is it the availability?
covered
Is it the rates? You know, or again, put in parentheses for people to think about availability and rates. you know,
No.
something. I think that's all mine.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
I hope I kept up with you. There was one where I got behind here. I
Okay,
think it
well,
was-
I can hand you my things
good.
afterwards. Actually, there's one last one. When you ask about the media, how do people get their information? It doesn't list Facebook, and so.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't list Facebook.
It lists social media though, doesn't it?
I know, but it just,
That's part of social media, it's my understanding.
okay, well, then we could leave it there. But we're not asking, does anybody ever use the county webpage? You know, or do you look
I
at?
don't know which one you're on now, Rachel.
Yeah, what number? I'm just trying to get there.
Okay, number 16, public
16.
communication and outreach. I just was wondering, are we as up to date and current?
Ease
Have
of
you-
finding information on pictoncounty.com.
Yeah, or have you ever visited the Facebook page? You know, things like that. Picken County's Facebook page, which we have. That's all. Okay,
Don't we get that when people, don't we get numbers from those when people get them?
Yeah, I mean, you know how many friends you have and clicks and all.
Can I tack on to the landfill one? I was just thinking, we've got
Yeah.
electronic recycling. I'd like to see something about plastic waste stream. You know, should we be doing more to interdict the plastic waste stream? You know, the talk is everywhere, communities around the country and the world, about stopping the plastic waste stream from going into our rivers and oceans eventually. And I'm
I think
just
that's a
wondering,
broader question than our own Picken County landfill,
well,
but
what about electronic recycling? That seems even narrower. I'd say
that's
it's a
a
bigger
required
question.
state law, so you have to kind of
Electronic is.
ask that you can't put electronic waste in the landfill. Again, I would take some of these back to the department of directors because.
Yeah,
Right,
point
let
out-
them
Really,
decide.
you're
You're
really
right.
right, but
If she-
the textile recycling is not even mentioned
Sure, there you go, right.
And to the extent that there's some educational component
A lot of our
about this.
initiatives aren't even there, right? So, okay,
We
then
have
last
book
one.
recycling too now.
we also sell paint and dirt and all those, and we
Right.
don't list all those things out, so.
The last, second one is just regarding household income. Are those ranges still appropriate? I think, you know, there's a pretty large jump. Number 5 is the highest, 100,000 or more.
So you are back over to where?
Sorry, number 40.
Okay, number 40 on page 6,
Is
Pat.
this a benchmark again, or is this something?
It is, but I agree with you, Greg. It actually, we've got a large number of working population that falls well within these ranges, and then just a large number of population that's maybe not in our workforce that the average per capita income would put everyone at
Number
the top.
5,
Yeah.
right.
So we can look at that. We probably won't get any good benchmark data.
Yeah. But
I'm
you could
gonna-
ask a higher number.
I'm going to suggest too, I know you guys don't have paper copies, but if there's other things that you think of, I think Pat would appreciate it since we're going through this pretty quickly. If anybody has any, just give her I'm going to give you this. Mine are both of them covered, but just for reference for you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Steve has some he wants to point out, so.
Okay, on number 33, where it says, do you own or rent your current residence? I think we should have a column that is either homeless or other, because there are people who crash on their friend's sofa, or they're living in they're living out by the roundabout
And
under
they
a tree.
probably
or-
won't get a survey.
Well, maybe they won't, but I'm thinking there's a lot of people who technically are homeless because they're crashing in a friend's house. They're not owning or renting, and they have a stable place to stay.
Well,
But there's no way for them to answer.
Well, but there are digital homeless people. There are people online who are
But
homeless.
let's
So-
ask the surveyor if they feel that would be a valid response. But I understand Steve's point, but will we get enough people who pick this up that, yeah, we
Okay.
would.
Number 24, the internet question. One possible addition to that would be, do you access the internet at work, at the library, at school? Because a lot of people, they don't need internet at home because they access the internet other places.
Maybe if it were to go along with how this is being asked, how important is it for you to be able to access the internet at home or school, or would that be?
Ask Kara what she thinks and how that would be.
Yeah, because that could direct where we're putting our emphasis on. Maybe everybody's getting it at the library and work, and we don't need to focus as much on homes, perhaps, or something. Let's see, 4, 5. I had a question way back at the beginning, but it maybe would go under the transportation one. And the question would ask, do you ride a bicycle or walk on county roads, on county trails? And maybe that would go in the transportation section, just to get a feeling for how many people are using the trails and or using the county roads for.
You could just use
Or
county roads for
bicycling
anything
or
other than
walking.
driving.
Do you ride a bicycle?
Because then you want to know, do you horseback ride on the county trails? Do you,
So that could go under the whole section 18, the transportation section. I had written it down over by the open space and trails part. But I think it's almost more of a transportation issue, perhaps.
okay.
If you ask three different, I'll figure it out with the consultant, but,
I'll give you my stuff too.
okay, how to ask that.
I can give you
And
mine
if you
too.
have questions, you can always come back at an open discussion or something, Pat, or get a hold of me.
Okay.
So basically, we're telling you to redo this.
That's
Well, to
okay.
update it, obviously to update it. And even though we want to look at some benchmarks, we're going to be looking to create new benchmarks as we move forward as well.
There are some items that some issues that are emerging, so we need to get rid of the old ones, add a few new ones that we can start calculating out in the
Yeah.
future years.
You just didn't see the ones we got rid of. We did
Thank
get
you for
rid
that.
of a
But that
few.
would have, the other question I think you need is time frame.
Yes.
And I am thinking late summer, early fall. Or do you think that would be conflicting with an election and people are already going to get being hit by all the election stuff that comes out? So maybe you would prefer.
Does this go, is this all verbal, or does any of this go out by mail?
It goes out by mail. It also, then they give people a chance to return it, and then if they don't hear from them, then I think they,
Do
I
some
don't know
follow-up
that we're,
calls?
yeah, I think they
To
call.
get enough of a sample?
And, yeah, internet, they have an
But
opportunity
if
to
it
do it
goes
on
out in the
internet.
mail when you're getting bombarded by political mail, it could just, so we need to take that into consideration when picking a date.
Also,
I
full
think-
season.
Two things. You're right about the poll, fatigue and everything. It's also really helpful to inform our budget preparations for next year, in terms of what people give us as feedback and things like that. So I think late summer,
Would be better than early fall.
yeah.
September, October, November, you're probably going to be getting a lot of political stuff coming through the mail everywhere, being bombarded, so maybe the end of August.
When is the Human Services poll happening?
I think
Not
we have to
as
check
we
with Nan.
speak.
Pretty soon.
Raft has already done theirs.
Well, this one is
'Cause
evolving.
I got a phone call.
Well, Raptor will be doing a second, we'll
Oh, they're
probably
gonna
be
do a
doing a
second.
second follow-up. And they're coordinating with us so it doesn't conflict with the Healthy Community Fund polling.
Yeah.
So ours is kind of in the works right now. Rachel?
And I apologize. I'm just trying to think about, are there any questions about affordable housing on that survey? Because it seems to have become one of the most pressing new issues for the county, and we've taken a certain role, but we all know how limited our
There's
resources
just an
are.
affordable housing poll that just came out. I just filled it out and sent it back in.
Was that the
Number-
Valley Regional?
Yes.
Number 22 has it, Rachel. Living in Pickens County, the first one is availability of affordable housing for purchase. Second is availability of affordable
Okay,
housing for
great.
rent.
Then we got it covered. Thank you.
All right. Have we bombarded Pat thoroughly now?
I can do it.
We could spend some more time doing that.
No,
bombarding you.
I'm good.
So we
anything?
expect this back by the end of summer, Pat.
Yeah.
Yes. Can do.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to move on to county right-of-way parking management. This should be an easy one, Brian. So I want the board just to say yes, nod your head, and we can. It's only one page or so, Scott.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the Public Works Director.
Scott Mattias, the Road and Bridge Manager.
Alyssa Dixon, Code Enforcement.
This one may seem like it's come to the board a little out at left field, because it is. We haven't really talked about this before. And it's really about residential construction parking in county rights-of-way. And that's why community development and public works are both represented here. This has been a problem for a long time, since I started working here. And Alyssa came on June, And maybe you can tell a little bit about your experience with construction parking, where the problem exists, and what you experienced last year.
So I started in June 19th of last year, and it didn't take long, maybe 3 weeks, to get my first call from Road and Bridge saying, hey, we've got a lot of congestion in the right-of-way up Willoughby Magnifico specifically. There was two very large houses being built on that road, and so they were also both happened to kind of be at the end of their construction when there's a lot of subcontractors there. And so it was causing a lot of issues for Road and Bridge. They were trying to do their summer operations and could not. It was causing issues with the grass being torn up on the sides of the roads. Also, neighbors taking things into their own hands, tired of people parking in front of their house and putting boulders right next to the road. So, which then had caused me to have to issue violations to them for having things in the county roadway. So it's kind of an issue that snowballed over the summer on that road in particular, but it also causes issues for emergency vehicle response because the road was very tight in some spots in these roads that normally the road is so narrow the way it is, and then there's cars parking in the right of way, but they're also parking halfway on the county road itself. So there's concerns about that. There's concerns again about neighbors taking things into their own hands. I had a few calls actually from the Picken County Sheriff's Office because they had calls because people didn't know that it was a code enforcement issue. And so people were trying to reach out in different ways to solve the issue. And so, and then I'm looking back on past violation logs when Patrick Waller was here in 2016, he also dealt with the same issues. These houses were under construction for 2 to 3 years, same problem. And so Road and Bridge also has contacted me over issues in Mountain Valley with people parking in the county right-of-way. And so I guess Scott and I had some discussions, and we were trying to come up with solutions to these problems.
And historically, the reason it's a problem is specifically Willoughby Way, Red Mountain, Mountain Valley, Hunter Creek areas is because the homes are taking up the lot for parking. And topography limits where people can park there, so the county right-of-way is left over. And so when Scott and Alyssa were considering this, we talked about actually formalizing the county right-of-way as the place to park. And that provides the contractor value. And so we valued those parking places with the City of Aspen Parking Department to determine what that value would be. And that's how we got to the $4,000 annually or $2,000 for half a year per spot to charge. So the way this thing would work is, ComDev would issue would analyze how many parking places would be available for the construction season. They would call Public Works and let us know that there would be 5 spots for this particular site, and we would issue a construction parking permit for that site. There would be hang tags issued to the general contractor, so he could give those hang tags to the plumbers or to the electricians or to the drywallers so they could park in those spaces. But he would be tasked with managing those parking areas. We did not think it was right to provide public parking areas free of charge for commercial activities. This may come up again in other areas of the county as well. But what we're focusing on right now is this residential construction parking issue, and really we have these key places we're trying to solve it in, but we would pass an ordinance if the board approved it countywide. But again, it's just a few select areas where we're having significant acute problems.
So I have a question. So it would be just in front of the residential property that's under construction. So if you had only a frontage of X space, you got 4 or 5 or whatever parking places, it wouldn't allow them to park in front of the neighbor's house next door or the one across the street.
That's correct.
And the other thing they would be issuing on safety issues. You can't, even though the property bends a curve, you're not using that spot on the curve And it could be even further limited in winter if we had some snow plowing activities in that neighborhood that created greater problems. So you can have 5 in the summer, but you only get 3 in the winter.
Sure.
We would even get down to that detail because I think we need to be very careful. I also think we need to be very careful with the neighborhoods and let them know, because a lot of people don't want any cars parked on the county roads, regardless of construction. So we can say either you get some kind of controlled parking or you get the chaos that you've been living with. But I think we're going to need to do a lot of public outreach. Neighborhood outreach. George, please.
Is some of this already addressed, and maybe obviously it's not addressed, but with the, when ComDev gives out a building permit for, and the contractor has to provide ComDev a management plan,
Yeah, the
construction management plan?
Yes, that is correct. But this is for looking at sites that maybe don't have as much parking as other sites on the site itself. And a lot of these parking issues come out of those types of sites. When it's a great big site, it's not so much of an issue. We're just giving people the opportunity to have it on the road, but to be a more controlled environment. And also, as part of a CMP, you can apply for a right-of-way parking permit the way it is with Public Works.
These are 2 other questions. These rates you came up with are similar, competitive with what the city uses for in their construction parking plans?
Correct. Yeah, I contacted the city of Aspen. I figured they knew it. They've been dealing with this for a while now, and we agreed on the numbers, and we would be right close to theirs.
And then lastly, to provide an option, last year was the first year we utilized the Buttermilk parking area for construction vehicles, and I don't know how successful that was, but we wanted to make sure that all the contractors know there's an alternative to being in lieu of paying these fees.
Absolutely, and that is the overflow consideration. So we would constrain the parking at the site. We're not going to let people go crazy there, but the alternative is they can go to Buttermilk and park there as well.
And we still need to incentivize the ongoing van pools because that's worked really well.
Yes.
So it would be contractors or people who needed to have their vehicles on site.
Correct.
Okay. Greg, and then I think Rachel.
Can we, or we're also incentivizing on-site parking, get it off the street and park on the lot if you possibly can. A couple of questions come up. One is, can a neighbor next door who doesn't want them parking in front of their place buy those rights and tie up the parking spots? That's one question. The other one is, somebody who's way out in the hinterlands, are they going to have to pay $4,000 if they're working on their place? I guess it's on county road, but they may be the only car for miles. Are they going to have to pay the same fees, and how do we think that's going to go over?
First question first. This is really limited to the parking, the right-of-way adjacent to the property being worked on. So the answer to the question is we wouldn't want a neighbor buying out the rights for parking in front of another lot.
It'd be totally associated with the construction
There could be a
project.
market for this, you know.
Exactly, like a TDR.
And then we'd have lawsuits and they'd be back in front of us for appeals.
So that, and then, yes, it would apply to those people, but we don't have the problem in the hinterlands. There's plenty of spots for people to get off the road. So we just don't have the problem other than, again, here in the urban area of Aspen.
But if they're on the county property, they can expect to have to pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah, if they choose to park on the right of way instead of 15 acres of flat field, then yeah, we would charge them the same.
Got it. Interesting.
I support the proposal. I appreciate you guys trying to find some way to sort this out. I think the only part of the slippery slope is to make sure it really doesn't become the out to not having a good construction management plan, and that people still are required, as Patty's saying, to do the van pulling when possible. I think this financial incentive should help. And when we notify people, it should be some sort of flyer that also includes the parking options that people can use. So it would be how to contact to use the Buttermilk lot, what their availability is if they park at the Intercept lot and take a shuttle in and things like that, so that we're just not heavy-handed, but we're trying to show what other options are available.
And where does the money go? Is the money earmarked for anything, or is it just going to the general fund? Or what's-
It's not
Road and
now.
bridge.
It would be the road and bridge permit. We have a line item where the permit money goes, so it would be general fund monies.
Okay, perfect. Steve?
I'm thinking of if there's a short project, like maybe there's a roofing company just redoing the roof, and it's gonna take them a few weeks or a month or 2 months. Would they, and yet they might need to park on the road, would they have to pay the full 4,000 or the 2,000, or would there be kind of a graduated thing if someone only needs it for 2 months, say?
Or a week?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we didn't address that. We really looked at the longer-term construction projects, but maybe in the ordinance we bring forward, there is a shorter-term duration. We tried to keep this simple, and I don't know that we have those type of projects really going on. They're usually longer in duration.
And probably, most of those, they probably have room to pull in the driveway anyhow, but there could be instances where they have a whole crew of roofing guys who need to park their cars and.
And again, I think the fee is there to incentivize van pooling out of Buttermilk. And so I would really kind of want to keep the fee schedule the way we have it, that incentivizes people to park at Buttermilk and shuttle people in.
I'd rather see that than, for that short term, and because we don't want to lose that incentive for them to van pool or carpool. So especially with the traffic issues at the entrance. Are there any other comments? So you would bring this back to us at some point in the near future?
Yeah.
Before the construction season gets kicked in?
I think we're hoping the 5th of May.
Is there some sort of an appeal process if someone has a special situation? Is that going to be somehow written into it?
I don't know that we would have that as part of the ordinance, but certainly there's always appeals that go on. We deal with them personally.
I think we have a general overriding appeal process that people that, but I want to check with the county attorney on that.
We'll do that.
Are there any other comments? That was easier than we thought.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So we are a wee bit ahead of schedule. We have a little 10 minutes. So do we want to go to future agendas while we're here?
We can do that. We're going to keep ahead of schedule. I
Because
think.
we have one cancellation on our interviews today, and that is Jessica Workman. She's going to reschedule. So we have some time there for maybe open discussion, because it'd be nice if we had a little more time to get us out to Buttermilk. All right, John.
Yeah, a couple things on future agendas. First, just a reminder for the board that on the 25th, we'll be adding an extension to the moratorium on e-bikes to go through July 1st. That's to give us time to complete the public outreach that has been going on and to develop a policy recommendation to bring back to the board. We think that that's going to be completed really probably in May. I think the board had directed to build in a little bit of extra time in case there are questions, and it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, speaking with Gary, he plans to bring the results back to us in May, and then we'll have that presented to the RAFTA board at our June meeting.
Right, and so my guess is you'll be completed before that July timeframe.
We just
but as
thought we'd
soon
do
as
it
you
to July
implement,
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
fine. Just letting you know how the sequence.
And then the only other thing I had is a little bit of a question. We did have a request from a high school student in Basalt who's doing a peace garden to come in front of the board and request some funding to support that. Eagle County has funded him. The school district's funded him.
He's done this before.
Yeah, and it's in it was in the newspaper the other day, so if the board's okay, we'll schedule a little bit
He
of time
does
during
it
the work
in
session for him.
In the quad or something at the high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've helped him out at Mountain Greenery.
Yeah, I think that he's got a number of private entities that are sponsoring him, and it's to provide a refuge for kids who are being bullied and that
Gives
sort
him a
of thing.
space to go to school. So, yeah, let's see what works for him and give him some time on one of our work session agendas. Would that work?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's all I had for you for future
We're
agendas.
talking about the 25th. We continue the closure, the house on the back of Aspen Mountain, the cabin, until that date. Have we made any efforts to set up a site visit?
We just got an email from Charlotte
Oh, just-
right now.
Oh,
And
Like,
I
literally.
was just going to say, I just saw
Whoa.
an email come through. They're trying to get it scheduled, so they're looking for some calendar feedback from the board. So the sooner you all are able to respond to that email, we'll try and get that scheduled.
is closure, is it continued on our agenda till the 25th? I didn't.
That is my understanding. It may not have made it into this future agendas
Okay, we need to make
packet,
sure that
but
gets on there.
obviously, we extended it to the 25th with the understanding that we'd try and get a site visit, and if we could not get one completed before that
Yeah.
date, we'd do another continuation.
The days that this email from Charlotte has are, they assume it'll be a 3-hour visit. So they're suggesting Thursday, April 26th, Wednesday, May 2nd, or Thursday, May 3rd.
Yeah, I think we can all have all gotten that email, so we can all respond.
Okay.
I need to get up my calendars because
Okay.
things are crazy, but yeah, so we can get back to Charlotte, maybe in the next 24 hours, that would be great. And then we might have to select some more dates. We'll have to see.
Right, those days still.
I had a few things. Does anybody else have things before I get started with my little list? Okay, on the next Tuesday, we have a start time at 11:30. I have an ACRA meeting. I told Rye Neely that if we need to start at 10:30 or 11, I can make it over here because we need time to discuss some executive session issues that came out of yesterday's meeting.
Definitely
Is
have
that okay with the board?
So move to 11?
Well, we'll wait to hear back
They
from
say.
Rye.
Got it.
When is our joint meeting with, or where is our joint meeting with Eagle County? Are they coming here? It's on the 15th of May.
We
There's no
haven't set
destination.
a location. I think we were thinking Basalt for that, but if it would make more sense to be up here, I'm sure they could come up here.
Okay, because,
I know we have other stuff that
so let's
day.
just keep that in mind so we can figure that one out. Those are the only things that I had. Does anybody?
The only thing I would suggest is the meeting that's coming up on Tuesday, May 1st with the Colorado River District General Manager, that we speak with John Ely and make sure we really have enough time, because he
You're
had
gonna follow up on that?
asked about a potential
Yeah,
agenda.
he's got that from our discussion
and whether or
earlier.
not we may potentially need executive session time
Yeah.
with him as well.
Anybody else? We're done?
On future agendas, yeah.
When's the holiday party in Christmas, do you know? I have to give you something to plan on.
That'll be July 13th.
And also, just to kind of
At,
maybe a small heads-up reminder is that coming up next week on Thursday and Friday, the 26th and 27th, is going to be the QQ Water Quality and Quantity Commission retreat. They're going to have the first retreat in many, many years, as the structure of leadership is changing and potentially the contract team we've been using. So really, anybody else is invited to that
I
from the
think,
board.
Greg, were you thinking about going?
It's on my calendar, yeah.
Okay, because make sure
anybody
you
else
guys
will need to
hotel
notice that,
reservations
John,
for that,
mind.
the night of Thursday, the
I know.
26th.
I'm sorry, my keyboard is not
Catherine said,
cooperating.
yeah.
I didn't catch that.
And that's,
It's the
this is
QQ
this in
retreat,
Frisco?
Greg and
I
Rachel
think
are
it's in
going.
Eagle
Yeah.
proper, not too far of a drive.
Steve?
Yeah, on May 2nd, their Club 20 is sponsoring the meeting with the Department of Interior people in Grand Junction. It's from 12 to 3:30, and that's one of the dates that Charlotte had given us for the tour, the site visit. And I don't know if Rachel or I would be able to be going down to that, but
I hadn't
I
actually
kind of
even
have
gotten back.
conflicts on
Yeah.
getting back in time for things, so I'm not sure that I can go.
I either didn't see or haven't gotten that email, so I'm not really sure what the meeting is about. There's the big push to try to move the Department of Interior, or at least the BLM offices, to Grand Junction and to the west. And so I think it's focused more on that than any given policy discussions. But if it is about policy discussions, we'll have to take a look at that.
Maybe in an open discussion, we can talk about that and find out more about it before we have the discussion, whether we want to try to get somebody there or not.
Okay, I'll try to see what that one is about.
On the we're in that week, John, May 4th is the Northwest Cog Economic Development Summit. So I'll be going over to Silverthorne the night before. It's a full day summit and it invites people from all over the region. And Tom Clark from Kremling did not get reelected, so he's chairman of the Economic Development District. I'm vice chair, so I'll be stepping into his role and doing the opening or closing remarks. So, and I know the 3rd is another date that Charlotte gave us, so depending upon what time we schedule that, because I need to get over to meet with staff in Northwest Cog before the event on Friday. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. So should we go to open discussion? We can take a 15-minute break and start back.
I'm okay pushing ahead.
Yeah. John, open discussion. Keeping you on your toes.
Electronic
I know
memory.
where the QQ meeting is specifically, or
Blame it on the
It's at a hotel there in Eagle.
which hotel. I'll look into it.
Yeah. She's got me signed up, so I believe.
Yeah.
to go to QQ.
Actually, on open discussion, I had the conversation
Victoria
already with you on the Basalt Peace Garden, which was a request for a student to come in. And I think that is all we've really got.
Oh, we need for executive session items, we need to have a discussion, probably an exec, about annexation and secession of the Eagle County portion of the Roaring Fork Valley. We need to find out what our rules and regs and rights and responsibilities are, and we also need fiscal input into that besides legal, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I already mentioned the need for us to convene as the ambulance district board when we talk about ambulance issues, and we need to find out from legal counsel about that too, but they can get back to us. And I don't really have any other. Are there any other open discussion items?
Me, I don't.
Let's see. Yeah, I do have. This has to do with the net zero energy education thing in Denver, which is, I remember Greg had sent this out. This is a conference on May 2nd also that's the pre-conference.
Yeah, May 3rd is the conference. I'm signed up for that.
So are you going? I just wanted to check and see.
So that throws another date for the site visit out the window. Well, that solved that. So now we only have the 26th is one of the days.
No, 26th.
That's
isn't
QQ.
good. That's the QQ retreat that's been scheduled.
So
for
would you let Charlotte
But what
know
was
that?
the conference that was the conflict on?
Well, maybe
her know
Greg
that
could
those
talk
dates aren't
more
Green
about
Building
it.
Council, Rocky
Want me to
Mountain
send her
Green,
back?
I can do it. It's
Net Zero Conference.
Would you use that? Would you get a new computer, please?
I'm booked already on that one.
I know you're stealing the other one.
What about the Friday meeting they suggested, the 3rd or the 4th?
Of May?
I guess it was the
Second
Wednesday,
and
the 2nd or 3rd.
And the 26th. So we need to come up with some other dates. We reminded the applicants that it's not going to be easy to schedule this, but so they have to be patient. So,
Yeah.
are there any other open discussion?
Okay.
Can we have open discussion? We don't have applicants coming until 2:30. So that gives us almost a half an hour. All right. Grassroots, we're taking a half an hour break.
unusual.
George, that was easy.
ramènent, oh mon Dieu, les ramènent envers toi. Mon Dieu, les ramène en séjour vers toi. Rappelons-nous son précepte sacré. Son précepte sacré, ouvrons nos bras à l'enfant égaré. Si la rigueur et la vengeance Mon Dieu, les ramène en séjour vers toi. Que le pardon et la clémence, oh mon Dieu, les ramène vers toi. Mon Dieu, les ramène en séjour vers toi, en séjour vers toi, les ramène en séjour, mon Dieu, vers toi. Home, no more home to me, whither must I wander? Hunger, my driver, I go where I must. Cold blows the winter wind over hill and heather. Thick drives the rain, and my roof is in the dust. Loved of wise men was the shade of my roof tree. The true word of welcome was spoken in the door. Dear days of old, with the faces in the firelight, kind folks of old, you come again no more. Home was home then, my dear, full of kindly faces. Home was home then, my dear, happy for the child. Fire and the windows bright glittered on the moorland. Song, tuneful song, built a palace in the wild. Now when day dawns on the brow of the cold. Don't let it stand now, the friends are all departed. The kind hearts, the true hearts that loved the place of old. Spring shall come again, calling up the moorfowl. Spring shall bring the sun and rain, bring the bees and flowers. Red shall the heather bloom over hill and valley. Soft flow the stream through the even flowing hours. Fair the day shine as it shone on my childhood. Fair shine the day on the house with open door. Birds come and cry there and twitter in the chimney, but I go forever and come again no more.
right, welcome back. Today is Tuesday, April the 17th, 2018. This is the Board of County Commissioners work session, and we are here for our upcoming regular meeting items, but we have an open discussion. Cindy, would you like to come forward, please?
Cindy Hubin, Community Development. I'm sorry I missed your open discussion. Thought it was later on the agenda, but we have a request from April Long, who is working with the city, who works with the city, but is also working on the valley-wide watershed plan, to have a representative from the board work with us on the watershed planning. And there's a summit May 18th. So all of you are welcome to go to the summit. But what I would like is to have the board appoint a member that we can work with a little more specifically prior to that meeting on some of the issues for the watershed plan. And just wanted to bring this out to the entire board so that we're all on the same page with who might be the representative on that, to work with Catherine, our land use engineer, as well as myself.
So this is the 18th of May. Do I have any of our water gurus across the aisle from me over there?
I would be interested.
Okay.
I think that'd be great. I mean, there's a potential I could participate, but I know my schedule's pretty busy. And I'd love to see Greg participate. I think that's great. The other thing is I really think it'd be good to involve and try to get a member from our Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. We do. Okay, so we already have members that way. Okay.
And so, Greg, if you would be the representative, that'd be great. And we will call on you to do some prepping for the May 18th meeting.
Great.
On the issues. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to it.
I think that would be good. There's May 18th, there's also a thing in Carbondale. I was thinking of going to Building for a Sustainable Future that has to do with building code kind of things. It's put on by Core and Clear, I think, are the main sponsors. So
I may have the May 18th date wrong. It might be May 19th for the water.
19th is is a Saturday.
Oh, okay.
So it's 8 Friday the 18th?
So
I'm
that would be
pretty
good
sure.
if you
What's this
cover that,
called?
Greg, and that would free me up for thinking of going to this other thing.
I'll make sure I get the right date, but I would hate for those two things to conflict.
Probably
Yeah,
will.
because you'd be drawing the same people, maybe in different
Yeah.
directions.
This is the update to the Roaring Fork Watershed Plan.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda, I would like to welcome Mr. Joe Krabacher, who is reapplying for Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'd like to come up to the table and introduce yourself to the public, please.
Hi, Joe Krabacher. I hereby swear to protect the Constitution of the United States and the Land Use Code of Pitkin County.
So help me.
So help me, can't say gods, but so help me,
Pitkin County.
most powerful one.
Well, welcome. It is always so nice to see you, and we
Thank you.
want you to know we truly appreciate your work that you've been doing with planning and zoning. We hear how much fun it is to have you sitting at that table, so we're a little envious. That's why we invited you in to see us today.
Okay, thanks.
And you are running, you would like to be reappointed to planning and zoning because?
Well, I think I have something to contribute. I've got a fair amount of history with planning and zoning. Maybe I got too much history, but
No such thing.
in a few years. But yeah, I still have some enthusiasm and, like to be involved in what's going on with the county and, can do my share of helping to preserve our rural character and protect our values.
Great. I'm going to open it up to the board. Greg, please.
Oh, yeah, Joe, thanks for applying or reapplying. This is great to see you in here. I'm looking at your suggestions for how to make the board more effective. And you there's some hints here. It's regular attendance, one, fill remaining vacancies, and then first-timer instructions on land use code. How would you create something like that if it doesn't exist?
Well, actually, I talked to Cindy a little bit about that before we came over, and I think that probably, well, first of all, I was pressed for time when I did those, and so maybe didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But I think one of the issues, or not necessarily an issue, but one of the difficulties is some of the members just, don't get it. And it happens sometimes with, new members who, it's a complex code. You start talking about GMQS and TDRs and how this works and that works. And, it's very integrated in how everything works. And I think a lot of people are kind of lost. But turns out Cindy said they do give some training for people when they first come on the board. And as with a lot of people, it's much easier to understand what the code says when you're applying it to a specific situation, as opposed to, oh, here's the code, just go read it, and then you'll know how everything works. So after a few times of going through that, then you get a little bit better at understanding and being able to participate more actively in the discussion and have your opinions known and so on. So, but I still think that's good, but I think overall the P&Z Acts is fairly effective. We've got at least a core group of members that are up to speed and are used to planner lingo and so on. But sometimes like we get bogged down in this Maroon Creek master plan because SKICO has its master plan, and then we have our county master plan, and then you have the caucus master plan, and people are like, well, that doesn't fit together. We already have a master plan. It's with the Forest Service. And so, for example, master plans are a little, it's a little quirky area. It's like, well, why do we adopt them if they're just advisory only? And how do you, get guidance from that? But I think that really just comes with experience and more time on the board and looking at specific applications.
George.
Yeah, I think, Joe, I think you hit it for in terms of trying to bring on new people. There is a cumulative knowledge that has to be gained as you go from one application to the other. And it's a learning curve, just like a learning curve for elected officials trying to get up to speed. So my question, though, is, in fact, I was just talking to Cindy about land use code items that we've talked about in the past in terms of TDRs, GMQS, house sizes, and how that all kind of integrates together. But my question is, when we have our joint meetings, how effective do you think those are? And could we be doing something else in those joint meetings and perhaps make better use of the time to perhaps help P&Z in your deliberations?
Well, I think, yeah, it's very helpful to know kind of what the thinking of the board is in terms of, your direction for the county and I can't remember when did we have the last one?
It's been a while.
Maybe I was out of town for the last one, but it's been at least a year or so since we had one. But I think that's very helpful to to kind of understand what the philosophies are on the board, and obviously everyone doesn't have exactly the same philosophy, but in general I think we have a common goal and trying to preserve the county and have smart growth and not uncontrolled growth. But how do we make that more efficient? I don't know. It's kind of inherently inefficient when you have whatever 5 members of the BOCC and 7 or I think it can go up to 9 members on the Planning and Zoning Commission. But even just sitting and listening and hearing what you guys have to say, I think is helpful. But I don't think I have any specific suggestions on how to make that more efficient.
I mean, how often do you think we should meet jointly?
A couple times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Steve, do you have questions for Joe?
Yeah, Joe, on the survey form, the renewal form, you talked about the 3 biggest challenges for the board, and you list 2 of them. I get it, long-term planning and balancing historic preservation and with growth and incentives. But then your 3rd one, you listed global warming and environment as biggest issues facing the P&Z board. And I'm intrigued by the environment part. Everybody's always talking about how the environment here is important, but then how do you see the global warming or global climate change issues relating to what the P&Z does?
Well, I think it's anecdotal, but for example, this ski season, last couple seasons, you know, I mean, it seems like, you know, it's real. And, you know, we're experiencing it with crazy weather and, you know, heat when we shouldn't be having heat, and, you know, it's raining instead of snowing and things like that. But I think that it's a much more difficult concept to wrap your arms around than like dimensional standards. You know, how high should a house be? How big should a house be? You know, there's a lot more to it, and it's much more nuanced and fairly complex area to be able to, quote, regulate. And so what was the last big global climate change was in connection with?
The building codes we had, and then
Right.
also we're looking at a lot of the
Sydney, you're not on mic.
greenhouse gas.
You have to get on a microphone, please.
Come sit.
Just chat. The last thing that we looked at with the P&Z, we looked at our greenhouse gas inventory that you looked at, as well as our draft climate action plan with the county. So the P&Z did get involved to a certain degree in that planning and knowledge of that information. And I think the beauty of having someone like Joe on the P&Z is that he understands the land use codes and what can be done for climate action relative to planning, siting things properly, encouraging more mass transit, getting more cars off the road, looking at different types of transportation and the way the patterns of our community. So I believe that Joe's got the experience to try to help put that mosaic together a little better for us than our current land use code does.
Right, so I guess the reason I talked about it as being a challenge for the future is, you know, I think the rest of the code is, you know, we make tweaks from time to time, and okay, yeah, maybe we need to look at solar and glare and things like that, but, you know, climate change is a huge issue, and something that, you know, we could maybe be a little more proactive in, but it's very difficult, you know, it's a very difficult thing to regulate.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pleased with your answer, because I know that's climate change issues is one of the filters I really look at every issue we deal with. I think about, well, how does climate change impact it, and how does this potentially help out on the whole issue of climate change? So I'm really glad that you're looking at that, and that the P&Z board is, you know, thinking along those lines, because I think it's incredibly important in this world today to be doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't, you know, we have the climate action plan, but it's not really incorporated into standards to some extent. I don't know if we've actually moved on to code amendments yet to implement what's in the plan. I think that's the next step in the process.
Rachel, did you have questions, or Greg?
You know, I would have had the same questions everyone else has been asking, and can really just thank you for your service and the time that you've committed to Pitkin County. It's huge. It makes a huge difference, and having that sort of experience and memory for the newer members is huge. We're interviewing and bringing new people along, but they need guidance, and so appreciate that. And you know, similar to George's comment, the only thing I'd really like to try to see us move forward more quickly, perhaps while I'm still at the table, is the discussion about TDRs in the future. We've talked a lot about, you know, should the second TDR be worth less square footage on a house than the first, and, you know, are there other ways to use them up, and things like that. So I really look forward to really engaging in that.
Okay.
And your thoughts on that, if you'd like to offer them, but otherwise.
Well, it's definitely a balancing act. You know, you have people that have, you know, vested, I wouldn't say vested property rights, but expectations about what their TDRs are worth, and may have used that for planning. On the other hand, you know, there's a lot of TDRs out there and limited areas for them to land, more of the master plans now, especially even like tonight. You know, we don't want them.
Yeah.
No more
Yeah.
TDRs in Maroon Creek. You know, Capitol has already that way. We don't
I've
want
kind of felt that if an
TDRs.
area isn't a receiving area, they shouldn't be allowed to be a sending area either.
I think there's something to that, and then on the other hand, it is it is the whole county, and we don't want to, whatever, have little enclaves that have different positions, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's
The way it is.
kind of where, yeah, exactly. It's kind of the way that we've gone on it. At a certain point, I would agree that the TDR program's probably run its course in terms of, its usefulness, but I don't know what the county attorney thinks about it, because a lot of times that's kind of the relief valve for, hey, here's a really crappy site. Do you want to buy it or take it? Or do you want to
Yeah.
give me a TDR? So, but it's been a great program. I think it's been,
Really.
groundbreaking in terms of, I mean, I do real estate stuff all over the country, and you start talking to people about the regulations we have here, and they're like, that's like so far ahead of what we're doing, and so I think it's, it's been a very successful program, and it definitely has some place, probably just, for takings purposes in the code going forward, but
Okay, that's all. I just kind of general.
Yeah, it's going to be a big discussion.
Again, thanks for the service.
So, so it's my understanding that you're running unopposed for this seat?
I don't know.
I don't
Have
think,
some other interviews, but
we've re-interviewed Monty, and I see that your terms are up like next week. So I think we need to, maybe at the end of today's date, we can do some addressing some, because we've had a lot of people. We have a whole page full of people who have applied for different boards, so it's pretty exciting for us.
Oh, that's great.
We've been interviewing lots of people for lots of different boards, so we need to follow up and take some action, because we will reappoint you by formal resolution.
Right.
So you are official.
okay.
All right, thanks, Joe. It's good to
Okay.
see you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks
Watch out
all
for that
your
weather out
hard
there.
efforts, and I know it's especially sitting through something like yesterday.
Oh, it was very entertaining. You should have come and joined us. We had lunch.
I heard about it afterwards. But
I bet you did. All right, thank you. So next, we have Kevin. Kevin, would you please come forward and introduce yourself to the board and to the public? It's nice to see you today. Thank you for braving the weather. And the mic needs to kind of be close and pointed at you, and the red light means you're on.
Perfect. My name's Kevin Michelson, and I'm here for a position on the Open Space and Trails Board.
And we welcome you. Thank you very much. We really do appreciate people who are interested in applying for our volunteer boards and commissions. And Open Space and Trails is a pretty active board these days. And they have a relatively active meeting schedule. Twice a month, Dale, is that right? And then we have, because of what's going on in the county with trails and issues, sometimes we do some special meetings when we all meet together. We do meet a lot as joint boards, which is kind of fun to have 10 of us at the table, trying to see who's on first and who's on second. But we really do appreciate your taking the time to come and apply for this. So does the board have questions? Steve?
Well, Kevin, the Crystal Trail is one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with right now, or that the Open Space and Trails Board is dealing with. So I'm just curious, how familiar are you with the Crystal Trail proposal, and have you been following along, and what kind of what's your feeling of the issue of a trail, a recreational and transportation kind of trail going through a narrow valley where there's lots of conflicts with wildlife and landowners' rights and that sort of thing?
Well, I've paid attention in terms of what surfaces in the papers, in the local papers, and I know that there's a plan online that you can look at, and I've downloaded that and given it a cursory look. I have not read it in depth because I know that there are a lot of issues involved in terms of all the various sections of the proposed trail. I don't have an opinion one way or the other on it because, quite frankly, I don't have enough information. I think that the idea of a trail between Carbondale and Crested Butte is a good idea. I know that it exists over Pearl Pass and West Maroon and such. People hike, and it's a lot of recreation on those pathways. So I would probably expect something similar if a trail existed between Carbondale and Crested Butte. But some people may not be interested in all of that activity, and so that's part of how you have to weigh in the proposal.
Okay.
Yeah, George, please.
Just to follow up on that, again, thanks for replying. So if you were seated as a board of trustee on the Open Space and Trails Board, what would be your priorities? Where are your key interests in terms of serving on the board and how you'd like to see those funds utilized?
So this interests me because I'm interested in contributing in our community. That's one thing that I feel like I have a lot to give, and I'm not necessarily positioned to contribute. And so this is one way that I can do that. And I consider our area to be a big playground, and I like to preserve what we have out there and also provide access to various people to go and enjoy it. I live like 15 minutes from a national forest wilderness area, and I think that it's a luxury to have that so close, and it's part of our county, and so to maintain access to these beautiful places is a gift, and I think open space trails is part of that, and if I can be part of that, it would be a good thing.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, there's so many questions to ask in these really brief interviews, and thank you again for applying. Have you talked about or thought about the time commitment? You know, as Patty said, they're really meeting often twice a month and often from 8 till noon and things like that. Do you have the flexibility with your employment to make those sort of meetings and site visits when they come up, things like that?
I do have the flexibility. I work as contract labor basically in architecture, and so I can manage my own schedule, and you know, I welcome the idea of regular meetings. I think it's almost better that way, to have regular visits rather than something sporadic, because you can get involved and there's always something to pay attention to, and so I would consider it just you know, another task that I have in my life.
Okay, and then you know, people have talked a little about controversy on trails. There's always two sides to every story. The same occurs with use of the lands, or whether purchases are good ones or overpriced or should be outright or just a conservation easement. But those sort of transactions and negotiations can go on for years. Are you comfortable with that potentially interfering or bumping into your work as an architecture when there may be parcels under consideration for purchase that you know about through the Open Space and Trails Committee meetings, but you need to just not say a word for years sometimes while those deals are working out?
Oh yeah, I'm comfortable with that. 100%. I mean, I don't see that as an issue at all.
Okay. And then through your skill set in your life and work, do you have any particular skills you think, you know, whether it's negotiation or dealing with land development or anything that could assist the board?
Well, as an architect, I've worked with land use applications as an example, so I've kind of experienced that side of things, and I'm part of a homeowner association in Shieldo Terrace where I live, and I've been part of agreements that have taken 5+ years to put together, so I'm accustomed to the extra length it takes to get things done, and yeah, that's just part of staying on it and seeing it through from beginning to the end, and yeah, I would welcome that. I wouldn't choose it, but if it happens, then yeah, you need to be ready for that at any given time.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I appreciate that.
Greg?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for coming. The first thing that has struck me is you're a national whitewater slalom team, Olympic trials. That's pretty. Still a kayaker?
I haven't been kayaking so much in the recent past, but yes, I did in the past until about 2000 was the last Olympic trials that I went to. I went to 92 and 96 and 2000 in the sport of whitewater slalom. I paddled to C1, and I remember being at a meeting when the city of Aspen approved the whitewater park down there at the John Denver Sanctuary now, and so yeah, I'm aware of the river situation. You know, the water park going in at Basalt, I thought was a good thing, and yeah, the hole is a little stickier than people had preferred, and
we worked on it already.
We'll see.
And I think that it might be better this year. We'll find out. But yes, I like to be part of the river. I miss the river quite a bit, and I'm hoping to reconnect more often in the future.
Great. My question regarding open space is that I ask this of everyone, I think. As we see the federal money drying up, or whether it's Forest Service or BLM or even state funds disappearing, or I call it abdication of various responsibilities for some of the public lands and lands that we all recreate in drying up, open space has been stepping in at times and helping with like the conundrum and difficult camp, things like that. And I can anticipate more of that happening. Just wondering what would be your view of maybe Pitkin County and open space taking on more against our will, really, but stepping in where the feds maybe or state are backing out on maybe it's enforcement, maybe it's care of public lands important lands in our backyard.
I would be for that sort of activity. I mean, I feel like we see it a little bit with the nature preserve. I think the open space and trails got involved with the situation up there, and I remember going up there as a user and having bodies there help me understand where the put-in is and the takeout and what the parking looks like. So, yeah, I think it makes sense. It wouldn't be my first choice. I would love for the federal funding to continue, and perhaps there are avenues where you can support that. But if those funds go away and the open space trails community and board wants to allocate funds, I would be with that.
Great, thanks.
Great.
Thanks for
Steve,
coming.
Please.
One more question. For your personal recreation, how do you use our open space and our public lands personally for recreation? For instance, hiking, camping, mountain biking, skiing on the Nordic trails, whatever your recreational pursuits are. What's your favorite things, what to do, and what are your favorite places to go?
Well, all of those things you mentioned are on my list. One of the things that I appreciate the most in the wintertime is Nordic skiing, and we have the largest network of free skiing in the country, or probably the world, I'm not sure. But it's a great benefit that most of our community is not aware of, and a long skate on Owl Creek Trail is a godsend. And even from the Basalt High School, I found myself skating on the Rio Grande up towards Woody Creek Tavern, and that's a blessing. All the hiking trails and biking I bike a lot in the summer, and I hike when I can. And so, yes, there are many aspects that I like to participate in.
Okay.
Great. So, we've had a lot of interest in this seat. This is a seat for 2 years, I believe. Is that correct? It's a 2-year seat replacing Tim McFlynn. So we will be appointing, and we have 2 more people to interview, and I don't know if our interview process, I'm looking at Dale, is closed yet, or if we're still advertising. Okay, so the advertising is still open, so we may have more. We don't know. So this is unusual for us to have this many, but it's really nice to see people interested. So it will probably take us a little while to get back to you.
Great.
But again, thank you. We really do appreciate your being here and
Thank
taking
you.
the time. Do you have any questions for us, though, before you go?
No, I just thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And
Great.
watch out for
Thanks,
the weather
Kevin.
out there.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our list for today, we have Chris Council. Chris, would you like to come up? And please introduce yourself for the record. You just need to have the mic in front of you and the red light should be on. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Council. I'm here about the seat on the APSHA board.
And again, as we've said, you probably just heard us, we really do appreciate people taking the time. And it's my understanding you've been involved with the other housing group, Horizon, right?
Frontiers.
New Frontiers. Frontiers. I knew it was Verizon, Horizon, and Frontiers. And we appreciate your time and effort there. So, and you're aware of the need. How often, I'm looking at Mike behind you, how often do they meet? Once a month? You want to come up to the mic?
Housing office.
Yeah. How often does the board meet?
The board meets twice a month.
Twice a month. And then there may or may not be meetings in between as necessary based on things that might be going on.
We just actually recently, we're going to talk about it tomorrow at tomorrow's APSHA board meeting. We're moving to basically a twice a month. We'll continue the twice a month meeting structure, the first and third Wednesdays of the month. But we're going with the permission of having talked with the chairman, and we'll be speaking with the board tomorrow about it. And we feel that the best approach for the meeting structure going forward is having the first Wednesday of every month a policy meeting, strictly devoted to policy, and then the second meeting scheduled every month will happen only if there's a land use and/or appeals case.
Perfect. So you'll definitely have the first meeting, and you may or may not have the second, but you let people know ahead of time.
Yes.
Great. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And they meet in the evenings on
Wednesday, first and third Wednesday of the
third
month
Wednesday.
at 5 p.m. In City Council Sister Cities room.
Thank you. You can stay there if you want to, because we might have more questions for you. So I'm going to, George, please.
Chris, thanks for applying. So you have your address in Snowmass Village.
Correct.
But you served on the board of directors for Burlingame, or it's just part of the Frontiers?
No, that was so both of those are in the past. So Frontiers disbanded about 18 months ago. I used to own a place in Burlingame, and about, 16 months ago I sold that. And I now own a free market home, a tiny little condo in Snowmass.
It's a home.
It's a home.
So you're living in Snowmass. And Snowmass has its own employee program.
Yep.
But you're applying for the Aspen Pickens County Housing Board. So why?
A couple different reasons. I think APSHA has a larger impact, clearly, just by the scale of the program. I think, don't quote me on the numbers, I think 1,600 ownership, 1,800 rentals, give or take. I might be off by 100.
A little bit. It breaks down to about 1,650 ownership and about 1,400 rentals, or 1,350 rentals.
So, whereas the Snowmass program, quite honestly, I'm just not super familiar with, but I mean, it's just minuscule in comparison. I was pretty involved with the Housing Frontiers group. I was involved with the board at Burlingame Phase 2 when that project came online, and getting policies and procedures, decks, bylaws, all that good stuff up to date. Or not up to date, and just kind of get it rolled out and getting the new community members aware of it. So I know the APSHA program. I don't know much about the Snowmass program. I think I can have a larger impact on the APSHA program, just based on my experience having lived in affordable housing, and then having transitioned into free market. Does that make sense?
Great, thank you.
Rachel, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for applying. You really have a very impressive resume as well. We're lucky. I was going to ask, how do you feel about things that are in the Aspen area community plan, such as respecting the urban growth boundaries of the communities and not moving into green fields outside the urban growth boundaries for housing development?
I think it's really important. I think I grew up on the East Coast. I moved here, I think, at some point I've probably photographed everybody in this room. I moved out here to work for the Daily News. Probably everybody except Patty. But I think everybody else at some point in their career joined the commissioner. So I know what it's like to grow up in high density environments. I used to live in Baltimore City. I've lived all over the world. So to me, it's very important. And I think that there are mechanisms in place. I know we have a massive housing shortage. But I think that there are, I think there's a lot of creative ideas out there that don't require us, building 12-story homes in Merle.
Yeah, thank you. And the other question I would ask is, there's been a lot of community controversy, perhaps unnecessarily so, about some proposals. And we actually were interviewing someone the other day who said, well, for this next generation, we'd like to make it so that you have to leave upon retirement or something like that for turnover of the units. And, I asked in response, well, do you really think we'll be able to recruit and retain quality people here who may be 40 or so, and tell them, well, we'd like to give you the last 25 good years of your working life, but then you've got to move out, leave your friends and memories behind. Where do you stand on that sort of question, and what sort of policies would you be promoting?
So there's two questions there. I'll answer let me answer the first one first. So it's ironic that the issue kind of came to the forefront in the last, I don't know, maybe probably 2 years, more with the Gen X group. That issue to some extent is why I actually reached out to Adam Frisch, how many years ago it was, when City Council, I believe, probably in conjunction with the Aspen Board, the commissioners passed a new rule increasing the age in the, I don't want to call it the bylaws, but in the rules effectively for what it meant to retire. And I think it went from 65 to 67, and they were trying to piggyback on the IRS rules for
full Social Security retirement.
Full
It's always
Social
in the
Security.
date.
And at the time, it actually quite bothered me a lot, so I reached out to Adam, and we started talking. He finally said, clearly you're interested in this issue. Why don't you come join us at the table? And my take on that was it really upset me, quite honestly, because I work really hard. I own my own business now, and my goal is to retire soon. It's not going to happen, but I would prefer to retire before the age of 75, and ideally before the age of 67 and a half now, I think, is the new rule. And so that really kind of bothered me, and my take on that, which is what it is today, is if you work hard and you've put your time in and you're a member of the community, why should you be forced? So in my case, my argument was, hey, if I'm able to retire at 63, 65, you just forced me to work 2.5 more years of my life to be a member of this housing community. And I don't think that's fair, considering at the time I was younger than I am today. So, why should I have put exactly what you just said, Rachel? Why should I put my 35 years in, and now there's a new rule that makes me work 2.5 more years? So I think it goes in tandem with the question you're asking. That people that have been part of this community for a long time, I don't think that it's fair, nor should there be a rule that says, okay, 65, 67, whatever the date is, you retire, thank you for being here, goodbye, you're out. With that said, I do think it's important to recognize there are constraints in the system with just simply with inventory. And I don't feel that somebody who joins our community at the age of 60 potentially is lucky enough to win the lottery and is then in housing for 5-7 years, that they should have the same rights as somebody who has been here since the age of 25. Right. I do think that there's a parity issue there. And I think there's some interesting might be the wrong word. I think there's a lot of creative ideas out there. Mike and I have talked about some of them. I think there's maybe a scalability issue, that kind of a credit issue, for every, for example, maybe every X number of years that you're a member of the community, that you get credit towards that amount of time after retirement. Again, I know all these are super controversial.
But it sounds like you're willing to work through and you understand some of the many values on the table surrounding the issue.
Of course, yeah. And I think in its most simplistic, absolutely not. Should you be forced to leave at a certain date just because you turn a certain age if you've been a member of this community for a long time? I don't think that's what our community values are.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just want to answer the second, and then your second thing was, what would I be, kind of what am I interested in? And I kind of have two things. One is a compliance issue, quite simply. Like we all do, we all know a lot of folks in the town. It's a small town. It's very expensive to build, as we all know. I think right now we're about $350,000 average subsidy per one bedroom. For every unit that we have somebody in who shouldn't be in, that's not fair to the program. It's not fair to other people in the program. And it's just a huge burden to the taxpayers of our community. Yeah. I think Tom Smith, by APSHA's own lawyer, I think his thoughts are maybe around 20% non-compliance. Some people think it's a lot lower. But I think that for too long we've kind of gone through goals of kind of having our Aspen values maybe have shifted a little too far to the extreme of letting people get away with things that perhaps they shouldn't have at the expense of people who really truly do have a need. And I feel really strongly about that. I think Mike's his goal of rolling out this fine system, I think, is a great first step, because it's been really hard in the past to kind of go from 0 to 60. We have, I won't say their names, but a couple folks in the community that are high profile in the news, and it's very difficult to remove somebody when we hit that to that point. But by having a fine structure, it kind of gets people's attention, makes people aware of, hey,
you have to return your affidavit each year.
Yeah, or I think there's exactly.
Start at the lowest level.
yeah. Start with the low hanging fruit.
Those are great answers.
Okay, very good. Thank you,
Steve.
APSHA has one of the largest inventories of housing for maybe per capita in the whole country.
You're right. It's the largest housing program in North America relative to population, hands down.
Yeah.
We have more for sale units than the city of Denver.
So that's just gives an indication of the priority this community has placed on an affordable housing program. And yet we have all these issues and shortages. We could use more affordable housing. I just read that Singapore, I think, has 80% of their population is living in publicly provided, I don't know if they call it affordable housing, but it's public housing that they provide in Singapore.
I think they're all in one unit, though.
That's like the maximum extreme we could go towards. So my question would be, what would be your solution for coming up with more housing or solutions that get more people into affordable housing? So maybe they could cut down on their commute from going from far away to get to work here.
I think if I knew the answer to that, I would be making a lot of money. I think it's like a lot of things. I think it's a multifaceted approach. And we are constrained by land, It's like Mark Twain, like they're not making any more of it. And we're also, like Rachel asked, like we're constrained by our values, as we should be, and we're not going to start putting up, 10, 20-story complexes. Which to me, a large part of it, quite honestly, comes back to what I was just talking about. Is one answer. So we have 3,200, call it 3,400 units, give or take. 20% of those, say 10% of those folks shouldn't be living there. In my opinion, and I'll give you an example, as I'm sure most of you folks know, like today's Tuesday. ski season ends Sunday, everybody's gone. And it's very upsetting to me as I look around, as I lived in Burlingame, as an example, to drive down my street every day and to see Range Rovers, Porsches, very nice cars, for folks that were living in a Category 2 unit. And then those same folks take a 6-week vacation to Bali, and then those same folks take a 4-week vacation to Mexico. And please don't get me wrong. We have, again, this is a small percentage, but it adds up. So I did the math one time, and it was something like, if we just took a look at those folks, like the numbers were equivalent to like the new phase of Burlingame. So that's a lot of homes that we can use for folks that need those homes. Again, 85% of the people out there, I think, are playing by the rules. They absolutely deserve them. I've got wonderful friends that are in the program, you know, with great families, and those are the folks that the program was designed for. But I don't think it's fair for those folks that take advantage of it. And again, I give a lot of kudos to Mike. I think as they begin to roll out the new AMI standards, the new area medium income numbers, as we start adjusting the prices, you know, housing across the board should be about 35% of your annual income. I think what's happened is the reality is for a lot of folks in the APSHA system, housing is maybe 15 to 18% of their income, which gives quite a bit of disposable income. And then you're able to do those things. So again, I think that's a long-term process. So I think that's a large part of the answer. I think another part of the answer is we are going to build some more. As we build, I do think that there's a lot of advantages to being an owner. I used to work for Habitat for Humanity, which is clearly the goal there is home ownership. But I do think that there's something to be said for the rental market as well as a step-up program. And I think that that as we move forward, when you have a rental program that you end up, just by definition of the program, you're able to create some constraints that might create a little bit more churn in the system, quite honestly.
Yeah, and then I
just need to say something briefly. You know, I think the worst thing we can do for the program, though, is to base a lot of our decisions on a lot of anecdotal information. And I've done my share of door-to-door over the years. So I remember going to Centennial a lot, and you'll see people who have more expensive cars. But there's a certain point at which they can't invest in their home because there's no greater return other than basic capital maintenance and upkeep. And they may have been trying for a long time to move into a more expensive unit, but they are not available. And so then you start making more 5s and 6s for these people who should, their income has risen over 15 or 20 years, be able to move into that. And then everyone is still trying to get into a Category 3. It's like, why are you building homes for those people? So, I mean, it just goes around in circles. And you know, the rule has always been that you do not re-qualify after you've bought a unit. So the search and the diligence about someone's real qualifications is early. But if after they're in that unit for 2 years and those parents pass away and you inherited money or you won the lottery, that's not a, you know, as long as you're still fulfilling your work requirements. So I think that's more of where you have to get after it. But I understand your basic concept of you'd like to see the appropriate utilization and as full utilization as possible per the income categories. But it's an ineffective market when there's not that movement capacity for people in general to move up or down the system. You have people who are maybe cost burdened by their houses who have lost the higher paying job or can't fulfill that anymore. So it's quite a challenge. But I do understand your basic premise. I just didn't want an anecdote to, you know, be the headline in the paper. That's what we're seeing, because there's a lot of people who do invest in a better car because, you know, where else are you going to put it, you know, or type of thing. It's not my choice, but, you know, you can't gold plate the bathroom, you know.
I think the only thing I would just mention to that is a car is a depreciable asset.
Yeah.
And a house isn't.
Right. Well, I'm going to try and wrap this because we need to be heading to our next meeting. Greg, did you want to be really brief? Because I'd like to make some appointments today before we go.
Oh, Chris, thanks for coming. A couple things. I'd love to hear about your history on boards, your experience working with boards, and what positions you had with them, and just the dynamics of being on a board. Is it, there's a lot to it that might not be obvious at first. And then also could be very controversial. Clearly it's a hot topic. So will you be able to, is that something you enjoy, or I just wanted to find about that. And as somebody who made the move to free market housing, I wanted to congratulate you for being able to make that jump. And I know it's probably painful. And you're talking about the burden of maybe housing expense on the free market for some of us. It's certainly, you know what that's like too. But I'd love to hear just, the dynamics, being on a board, working in a team.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've probably spent my whole career working in teams to some extent. I mean, I don't think there's a profession out there, if you want to be successful at, that you can't engage with other people. I mean, these days it's changed. I mean, I used to be the CEO of a company, of a small nonprofit. So, and then after that, just having, I've always had different teams that I've either led or worked on. And you can always accomplish more with multiple people. It doesn't mean that it's always an easy process. I think it's good when you have people with different viewpoints. Again, I wouldn't sugarcoat it, as you guys know. Like, sometimes it's hard to come to consensus. But I do think that it's important to recognize different people's points of view. So I think I've always been able to at least step back and listen and recognize. It doesn't mean I necessarily, at the end of the day, will agree with them, but I do take pains to recognize people's points of view, where they're coming from, what their backgrounds are, why they have that perspective. It's nothing I would shy away from. I wouldn't, in terms of, there's clearly hot button topics out there. I do think it's important that you kind of keep it in the family, so that you don't run outside and, outside of a board meeting, and you finish a board meeting, you disagree, and you run over and you talk to your friends at the paper and say, oh yeah, well, this is what happened. Like you have a discussion, you act as adults, and you try to work through the issues. And again, that doesn't mean at the end of the day, if you have 5 people on the board, that all 5 are going to agree with each other. But I do think that there's a way to get to some level of consensus. Does that help answer your question?
It helps to see how your mind works on it. Yeah, thanks.
So we've had 3 people interview, I believe, for this seat. Do we have any more? Is the advertising done?
I believe it is.
Okay. So that, we'll bring it back to the board. We have a lot of appointments to make, and so we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And thank you again. We really appreciate your coming in.
Great, thank you.
So we need to be out at Buttermilk here shortly, but I'm going to do this really quick so we can get some appointments in here today. I'm going to just do the ones that were the renewals. We had Monty Thompson for P&Z, James Vashanti for P&Z, and Joe Kraybacher, and Deb Overender for Senior Services.
Yes.
So are we going to go ahead with the renewals, the 3 renewals for P&Z and Deb? Mm-hmm. Okay, we also had a citizen grant review for the youth, Will Brown. I don't think we've officially appointed him. He was the young man that came in. He is a junior, I believe, or sophomore.
There are 2 places open?
Yeah.
I think he's a junior, yeah.
Yeah. So we can appoint him.
He is a sophomore, yeah. Yes, I'd say yes.
Did you get those, John? I have them if you didn't. Okay.
Okay, the youth, yeah, the youth.
So the youth and those 4 reappointments. And then we'll need more discussion, I think, on the housing one, so we'll set that for another time. And then the other ones, we still have a couple more interviews for the Board of Health, and that advertising is still open. And then we have 2 more people to interview for the Open Space and Trails District 4 seat. So we will discuss that at a future date. Are you following me, George?
No, but that's okay.
You look very quizzical.
No, just look at my list.
Okay. So that's good. We're done. All right. We're going to adjourn, and we will see everybody out at the Inn at Aspen.
Okay.
Thank you. I got that done.